So I was just listening to one of these podcasts, and they're finally starting to talk about black holes in the way that I think that I was suggesting might be the actual explanation of how they work. So basically, I would say that if you enter a black hole, you one theory that I had, like one idea that I had was basically like that from your perspective, you're still you. I mean, you don't suddenly change, right? It's a stretching thing, right? But the rest of the universe, compared to you, everything that was matter essentially stretches out. It becomes radiation, and everything that's radiation, I guess, might become matter. And then you would actually be the radiation that's already coming out. Now, side note is that if you're observing somebody enter a black hole, according to general relativity, it takes an infinite amount of time. That's assuming that there's a continuum, though, that the math is actually exactly like that, but it's probably not. But still, even if it supposedly was, if you see radiation coming from the black hole, there's no reason why you'd have to assume that you'd have to see somebody entering before you'd see the radiation coming out anyway. Because you're already, when you're switching time and space dimensions, you can't just expect that from where you're observing that you're going to see things in that order anyway. But if you really think about it, that's interesting, right? Now, I might be wrong, or I might have something switched, but when they're saying black holes are actually mirrors, the reason why they're coming up with these theories, the reason why they're explaining this way, is because most people don't actually think about the math properly from just with the correct order of understanding, basically, of the kind of the precepts. And I understood that a singularity is not a real thing. It's just a mathematical concept. Explaining that a mathematical concept is, or a mathematical model is breaking down. So the tangent function, right? It's not infinite at a specific value. It's just undefined. I mean, when you're talking about triangles, I mean, when you look at the measurement of what tangent is talking about, it would have to be infinitely long right when the triangle is basically not a triangle anymore, right? So the point is, we're looking for something natural. When you enter into a black hole, something naturally is happening, right? It doesn't just magically crush you for no reason. If it's stretching the space-time, it shouldn't make you feel pain, right? We have these popular physicists, physicists who tell you this. They say, oh, you'll be spaghettified and it's painful. Well, if you're being stretched because the space-time around you is being stretched, not you being stretched relative to the space you're in, then you're not actually being stretched in the classical sense. So there's no reason to assume that would be painful, unless by triangulation your body could actually even detect that it's happening. So when you enter a black hole, when something enters a black hole, I wouldn't be surprised if radiation that we've already seen is radiation from something that hasn't even entered a black hole yet, for example. Because it's so hard to explain this. So it's just, I wouldn't be surprised. I'm not saying that's how it works. I'm just saying I wouldn't be surprised. But I also wouldn't be surprised if they actually say there's no such thing as a space inside the black hole. Zero surprise. If they even start, feeding more evidence into that concept. Why am I not surprised about that? Well, what is it, what do you, Imagine trying to make a diagram of what you see in a magnifying glass, right? If at first you just don't know much about a magnifying glass and what it's doing, you might try to draw a boundary somewhere, and you might say, well, outside of this you see normal things, but inside the boundary you see a magical space that doesn't exist except inside of a, you know, land. But it turns out everything that you see in the magnifying glass is always, well, it might be swapped, it might be zoomed in, inverted, it might be changed in a few ways, but it's still just the outside world. It's just light that's coming into the magnifying glass. So if space-time itself, rather than just matter, is being clumped up into a black hole,